and so it is. All righty, everyone. Well, thank you for being back with us. And we're continuing on from last week. We started last week talking about what's been holding us back. What do we allow, perhaps not consciously, but what do we allow by not consciously changing, by not consciously knowing where we are and deliberately choosing something different? In that regard, we allow ourselves to be stuck. And what we're talking about is we are part of that forward movement of life. We are part of that evolution of life that we see here on this planet that is constantly moving forward, constantly, albeit slowly in terms of our lifespan here. But it is nevertheless constantly moving forward, constantly evolving, constantly changing, constantly expanding. And this consciousness that we are, this awareness that we are, arrives at a point where we become self-aware. We become aware of the activity of what we call our mind, what we call our thoughts. And it seems that we as human beings are unique in that capability. Among sentient beings, we are unique in that capability. Perhaps not. But nevertheless, we are. We have the ability to be self-aware. We have the ability to choose our thoughts. But we don't always exercise that ability, right? And here's the kicker. We have the responsibility and we have the accountability. And by that I mean our life is really an outpicturing of our beliefs. We believe that there's a power in the universe that responds to us according to our belief. We call it the law of mind, but in other teachings you would say it's the Holy Spirit, the doer of the word. We are taught that as you think and believe in your heart, so are you. We are told to pray believing in our hearts and it shall be done. You see, what is it? What is it about life itself that we as conscious beings capable of choosing our thoughts and directing our thoughts, we can then cooperate with this power, this power that does unto us according to our belief. We can direct the course of our own evolution, our own growth in our own lives. See? So we have that responsibility to do it because no one else can do it for us. It's the one thing that we have to do for ourselves. No one can wave a magic wand for us. No one can do it. We have to one day say, oh, it's up to me. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And I'm going to do it. I am doing it. I'm getting on with it. And then the accountability comes into that whether we do it or not, whether we do it effectively or not, we're the ones that get to experience the results or the consequences. Now, consequences can be happy and positive and good, or consequences can be negative and not so good. But we're the ones that get to experience the outpicturing, if you will, of our thought, of our beliefs. And if we do not take control in regard to choosing our thoughts and keeping our mind stayed on what we want, as Wendy said in the opening quote, lift our eyes up from the ground, look to the far horizon, keep ourselves focused on what it is that we are literally becoming, not where we're going, but what we're becoming. If we don't do that, then we get to experience kind of mediocre results. We get kind of stuck for a while. Now, we don't want to beat ourselves up, right? That's part of our experience, is that we tend to, at times, we tend to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We tend to wander here or there and go follow different distractions. That's part of the experience. That's part of us becoming unique, individualized expressions of the divine. You know? I know I mentioned to you one time there's a little cartoon in the in the Sunday papers when we used to get the Sunday paper with the cartoons in the comic strips. There was one there called Family Circus, and it was about a young family with a couple of small children, and the children were always doing something cute. And there's one where the little one comes in, and the mother says, "Where were you?" And the kid says, "I was at school. I just came home from school." And she says, "Well, you're late. Did you go somewhere?" And the kid says, "No, I came straight home." And then the next box in the cartoon shows the path the kid actually took. Started home, went to the playground, left the playground, went to the candy store, left the candy store, went to the toy store, went to grandma's house, and then came home. So we tend to wander. But it's part of the process of developing or maturing in consciousness. We have to have these experiences in order to develop our unique gifts. We have to go out and explore. But we can stay too long at the fair. We can go and explore too long, and then we can tend to get stuck. So I was thinking this morning, we've been watching on the videos, on the streaming videos. There's a camera now on the volcano in the Canary Islands that's been erupting for a couple of weeks now, and it's just absolutely amazing to watch. As this molten lava just squirting up out of the ground, running like a stream of water running down to the sea, burning everything in its path. It's awesome. It's majestic. And along with these eruptions, of course, there's earthquakes, and we know that the surface of the earth has plates, the tectonic plates, and the tectonic plates kind of bump up against one another, and they move, and one goes underneath the other, and the ground shakes because it doesn't go smoothly. See? It resists the change for a while, if you want to think of it in those terms, right? The pressure builds up, the pressure builds up, the pressure builds up, and then one day that pressure has to let loose. And when it does, the ground shakes and the plates move a little bit. So I want you to keep kind of that picture in your thought of when we resist the natural change in our lives, the natural impetus to move forward and to become more, to realize more of what we already are, and become that. See? When we resist that, it's kind of like the plates not moving. Tension builds up. It doesn't feel right. There's something wrong. We may be agitated. We may be aggravated. All of these different things, and then there's some kind of an explosion of emotion, or some kind of eruption. Something happens in our life. Now, of course, if an engineer had together the plates, we would have put some WD-40 down there and ensured the smoothness, as the plates moved. But that's not the way they work. See, that's not the way they work. But in our lives, see, we can make things a little bit smoother. We can recognize that life is expanding, and it wants us to expand with it. It wants us to expand because that's our nature, to expand. It wants us to grow in consciousness, and by that I mean in the conscious realization of the presence of the divine. It wants us to grow more in awareness of what we truly are. And if we resist that change, we get stuck. If we wander too far and too long, we get stuck. No matter what we're doing, we can be growing. No matter what we're doing, we can be developing our consciousness, doing our work every day. Especially if we're doing something that involves manual labor, working in the garden. That's why working in the garden is so pleasant for so many people. While you're there and you're tending the soil and you're participating in nature, you can be focused. You don't have to be thinking about anything else. For many years, I made a living as a technician, as a troubleshooter, and it was always in the head. You always thinking, well, how does this supposed to work? What is it doing that's not supposed? What is it not doing that it's supposed to be doing? What is the systems, what components always kind of going in the head, and it's very hard, at that time to be able to bring my mind to something else. And of course I wasn't aware of these things necessarily at the time. But it's possible for us to, even in the course of our day, driving to work, riding the bus, taking the subway, all the different things that we do, it's possible for us to be present in that moment, and to be aware of what we are thinking, and to ask ourselves very simply, is what I am thinking what I want to be thinking, what I want to be thinking? So today we're going to talk about techniques or practices, and the importance of the techniques and the practices in helping us to do the one thing that we have to do for ourselves, right? Which is to be aware of this activity of consciousness that we call mind or thoughts. So consciousness, if we think about it just for today, for the definitions today, because there's so many different definitions, we'll probably use a different one another time. But consciousness is awareness. And when that awareness moves from here to there, that's called thought, or that's called mind. The activity of mind is thought. Remember, Dr. Holmes tells us that trained thought is more effective than untrained thought. So there's this awareness that we say is our awareness, where we say it's my mind. It's a starting point to say that. But it seems to operate independently. It seems to flit from here to there to over there to everywhere. As Osho said, it's our mind is like a stray dog that wanders, and then we follow it. We follow it. And at some point we have to become aware of that. We have to become aware of how it works. Now the reason for this, and we talked about it last week and for several weeks, the reason for this is that what we truly are, is beyond that. It is before that. It is that which is beyond words, but from which words come. That which is beyond thought, but from which thoughts come. So the one example we get from the East is as if we are looking for a jewel that we've dropped into a pond, and we're waving our hand around in the pond, and we're searching around trying to reach down into the field for the jewel. And all of this activity, it's stirring up the ripples of the water so we can't see through. Stirring up the mud, we can't see the jewel that's down there. But if we just cease that activity, if we just stop trying and straining and struggling, see, the mud settles down, the water settles down, and we can see that which has always been there, this beautiful gem that we're looking for. I also gave the example last week of the illusionist who worked in the Second World War for the British Army, and his job was disguising things so that the enemy couldn't see them. And he came up with a system of lights and mirrors around the Suez Canal. And the mirrors, I haven't quite figured out how they work, but they rotated, and apparently they were angled so that the light bounced back and forth from one to the other and got amplified. And they shined the light into these mirrors, and then they spun the mirrors, and it caused this big scattering of light to go up into the sky so that the enemy pilots could not see what's there, which was the Suez Canal. So if you've ever gone out at night, if you've been walking down the street at night and a car comes at you, you're blinded by the headlights. That's all you can see. If there's anything behind that car, you can't see it because the light washes out everything behind it. So this example then of the ripples and the mud and the mirrors and the lights, this is the activity of mind. This is mind in action. We don't want to fix mind. We want to recognize that mind is the distraction. Mind is what is keeping us from seeing what is already there. And we need practices to help us to avoid becoming entangled with that activity of mind. Right? So by entangled, I mean we're sitting here, we're listening to a talk, and then all of a sudden, boom, an idea pops up into our head and say, hey, do I need to run out to the store this afternoon and get a gallon of milk, you know? And then you become entangled with the gallon of milk. Well, when's the last time I used milk? How much was in the container? Well, when's the last time I bought it? Maybe it's expired, you know, and all these things, and you follow the milk, you know, and then you say, well, yeah, well, I'm going to go get milk, but do I need to get gas while I'm out? You know, well, when's the last time So now you're not at that point. You're not listening to the talk anymore. You're not thinking about the talk. You're thinking about milk. You've become entangled with milk. We become entangled with our thoughts. We become identified with the activity of consciousness called mind. We think that we are the mind, right? And Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And we believe that. You know, we believe, oh yeah, well, whatever I think, that's what I am. No. I would say, I have become aware of thought. I have become aware of lots of things, but I become aware of thought. I am not the thought. I am not the thinker. I am the one observing the thought. I am the one observing the thinker. I am the witness, you see. But our society is not there. Our society kind of overly identifies with the activity of mind. We think that's us. I am that. Whatever the voices in my head tell me, I am that, right? And Osho gives us a great example of how entangled we become. He said, if you go to the doctor and the doctor, you know, looks at your blood work and says, well, you know, there's something not quite right here in the chemistry of your body, and I'm going to give you this medicine to take, and this medicine will improve that. You know, you would think, well, you know, I'd rather not have that condition, but you know, what's the big deal? I'll take one of these pills every morning. You know. We wouldn't become overly identified with the body or the disease or feel bad about it or feel ashamed of it or anything like that. But if the doctor said, you know, there's something wrong with your mind, and we're going to have to give you this medicine to take to help you deal with that, there's a totally different stigma in our society about mental illness. Right? There's all kinds of things that are attached to it that shouldn't be. But they are, and the reason for it is we are overly identified with thought. We are overly identified with the activity of mind, and we think that is who and what we are, and we are not. And we have to learn to break ourselves of that. We have to learn to stop identifying and becoming entangled with those things so that we can experience that which is already there. So, because what we are seeking is before mind, or beyond mind, or above and below mind, but it's not mind, and because mind is in the way, consciousness is in the way, the movement of consciousness, the intellect won't take us there. The intellect cannot get us there. This is the razor's edge. We're walking the razor's edge. The intellect tells us there's something beyond the intellect, but the intellect can't take us there. And at some point we have to let the intellect go. And the intellect says, but I want to understand that. And we have to say, no, you can't help. You can't help with that. It's just something that you're not cut out to do. The intellect has been a great help to us as we have evolved. It has been a great help to us in our lives and all the things that we figured out how to do and things that we did for work and all of the different things we did. But there is a place where it cannot go. And practice, techniques will take us there. Many years ago, I read the book Zen and the Art of Archery, and it's Eugene Harrigan or Hergel. I'm not sure which. I'm sorry, I don't remember it. But it was a very fascinating book to me because it was about a man who was a college professor, but he was German, and he went to Germany, and he went to Japan, and he was going to teach there. And while he was in Japan, he wanted to study Zen with a Zen master, and he couldn't find any Zen masters to take him on as a student. And he went and he had a colleague, a Japanese colleague, and he said, you know, what's going on? The Zen masters, I keep going to them, and I want to sign up for lessons, and none of them will take me on. And his friend said, well, the Zen masters are firmly of the opinion that Westerners do not have the discipline necessary to become a Zen practitioner. They don't have the discipline to do the practice. They don't have the discipline to do the techniques. And of course the guy became indignant, you know, as we would in our Western way of thought. What do you mean I don't have it? You know, I am enough. I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me, you know. So finally, with the intervention of his Japanese colleague, a Zen master took him on. And the Zen master said, well, you need to pick an art. You know, in Zen, there are different arts that are practiced. There's archery, there's the tea ceremony, you know, there's different things that the Zen masters do and teach their students. And he said, I don't understand this, you know, I don't understand why I have to choose an art. I want to study Zen, you know. And he said, it's in the practice. So he selected archery, and that's what the book is about, Zen and the Art of Archery, and it's about his development as an individual through practicing archery the Zen way. And he said he studied with the master, you know, and of course this isn't archery like you and I understand, like we see in the Olympics. It's a totally different thing. And he studied and he studied and he practiced and he practiced. And he got to the point where he just wasn't getting any better. He just wasn't making any progress. You know? And finally, in desperation, he went to the teacher and he said, I don't understand it. I don't understand what's going on here. And I've been studying with you for all of these months, and I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I can't make any progress. And the teacher said, of course not. He said, what do you mean, of course not? He said, well, your breathing is all wrong. He said, you have to practice breathing. And the guy become angry, you know. And he went back to his colleague and he said, I don't understand this. You know, this just doesn't make any sense to me at all. If proper breathing technique was an important part of this art of archery, that they should have sat me down day one and they should have explained to me and told me how to breathe. And the colleague said something that it just strikes me to this day. And I first read that book maybe 30 or 40 years ago. He said, if day one, if the master had told you that in order to be a proficient practitioner, say that 3 times fast, of the art of archery, that you had to sit twice a day and practice breathing a certain way, would you have done it? And the fellow thought about it. He said, you know what? I would not, because I would have thought this has nothing at all to do with archery. The guy said, exactly. He said, but now you have months and months and months invested in learning how to do this. Now that you know that breathing is important, the technique is important, will you do it? He said, yes, I will. See, he was invested now, right? So in sales we're told, you know, get the prospect invested in the sale, get them invested somehow in what the outcome will be. He was invested. So what the master had done was got him to do something, but he could only complete it if he did the technique. He had to learn something new, he had to practice something new, he had to do something differently if he was to advance. And he had that motivation, and then he did it. Without the technique, without the discipline, and I remember what the colleague told him, that the Zen masters thought that Westerners did not have the discipline necessary to do the practice. So the Zen master tricked him. So the Zen master tricked him in saying, okay, well, you can walk away from all of these months, or you can sit down and do your practice. The practice was important. I was also reading something in Osho's work, and he was talking about Pythagoras. You know, remember the Pythagorean theorem we learned as kids in school? Well, in addition to mathematics, he was a philosopher and believed to be a mystic. And the legend has it that he went to India, and to Egypt. Supposedly he went to India as well. Excuse me, get some water here. But he went to Egypt, and he wanted to study at one of the esoteric schools there. And the teachers at the school said, well, we will take you in as a student, but before you come in as a student, you must go on a 40-day fast, and you must learn how to breathe a certain way. And Pythagoras was like the German fellow in Japan. Pythagoras was bewildered. This doesn't make any sense. I came to study. I came for knowledge. I came for understanding. I don't understand what fasting and breathing a certain way has to do with it. And he said, well, you know, it's your choice. You can do it or not do it, but until you do it, you're not going to get into school. And he said, by the way, you said you came here for understanding, but knowledge is not what we're about. It is the experience that we are about. So Pythagoras went off and he did as he was instructed. He ate a certain diet, ate a certain way for 40 days, and he breathed a certain way. And I'm going to go into that technique in just a second here. Because this one technique, if we just take one technique, stay with it, we will get results. But if we won't get such good results. But when Pythagoras came back to the school, they let him in, and he said, well, you're letting me in, but I am not the same Pythagoras I was 40 days ago. 40 days ago, I thought you were all crazy telling me I had to eat a certain way and breathe a certain way. But I've changed. Doing the technique has changed me. Doing the technique has opened me up to a new experience. And now a new person can enter the academy. So there's certain things that we must do, certain practices we must do. You know, prayer is one of those practices. Meditation and different meditation techniques are certainly many different parts of what we must do. But remember what we're doing. In prayer, we are opening our hearts. Poetry, we're opening our hearts. We're moving out of our head. We're moving into feeling nature. We're moving into our hearts. Poetry and music and the arts, right, take us out of our head, bring us into our hearts. And what meditation does for us is stops our entanglement with the activity of thought. Not trying to fix mind, not trying to do anything in particular to mind other than to get past it, So this technique that they gave to Pythagoras is a very simple one that each of us can do, but you must have the discipline to do it. You must have a time, you must have a place, you must have a discipline to do it. One year at the conference of Silmar, one of the ministers, I think it was Dennis Merritt Jones, I think, somewhere in California. I'm trying to remember. I can't remember exactly where he's from. But he got up on the stage. This was an old YMCA camp, the Asilomar Conference Center, and the auditorium held about 500 people, and there was a stage, and you can picture there around the early 1900s, 1920s. Hearst built this place. Kids up on the stage doing plays for their parents and things like that. But the minister got up on the stage and he said, now, how many people have a special room in their house for washing their bodies? And of course, everybody raised their hand. Everybody's got a bathroom. He said, how many people have a special room in their house for washing their minds? And hardly anybody raised their hand. And his point was, shouldn't you have a dedicated place? Shouldn't you have a dedicated time? Shouldn't you have a ritual? One time we met a lady, and what she did was she helped people build a little altar in their house, just some place where they could go and sit and basically say, "This is my sacred space. What I'm about to do now is sacred work. I am about to do my techniques." So this technique that they gave Pythagoras to do was simply this. Close your eyes. Of course, you're sitting someplace where it's safe to do that. I think of Al Franken in the audio tape he did. He said, "Not while you're driving." Stuart Smalley. It's a guided meditation through a dysfunctional forest. If anybody wants to look for that tape, it's out there somewhere. It was hilarious. Close your eyes. And look for the third eye. Look for that spot between the two eyebrows. Bring your two eyes together and move them around. Kind of move them around like you're looking inside your forehead, until you find a spot that just feels right. Your eyes will naturally want to stay there. So this spot, the mystics tell us that this spot kind of craves our attention. This is the third eye, and it's asleep. It's closed. And this practice helps to open it. So we bring our attention up there, and we hold it there. As we breathe in, as we breathe out, we hold it there. See? And as we're doing this, what we're imagining is that our head is filling with light. As we breathe in, the light energy, the prana, as they call it, the light energy comes in, though our entire head space fills with it. And then it starts shooting out the top like a little fountain, and the light energy is coming down. Sounds silly to our Western mind, but it's a technique that causes us to concentrate. Number one, and it has some type of a sort of, I guess, perhaps a physiological tie is the best way to put it. There's certain things that we can do with our body that stop our mind. I'll give you another one in a minute. But this one, you bring your attention to the third eye and you just keep it there. And as you breathe in, your head fills with light until the light shoots out the top and sprinkles down on your body like a fountain. And stay with that as long as you can. As long as you can. Set your timer. If you have to be someplace, set your timer. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you can. But that's one practice, that is one discipline that you can engage in. And now what this does, there's a couple of things that it does. Maybe understanding what it does will give us a little bit more incentive to do it. When we do this, we become aware of the activity of our mind. As we do this, we become the witness or the observer of all of these random thoughts that are going through our head. And it helps us to develop our powers of concentration. Remember I gave you the example of the shepherd with the crook, and the little lamb wanders away, and the shepherd grabs it with the crook and pulls it back. You and I are the shepherd of our own thoughts. You and I are the shepherd of our own minds. And as our mind starts to wander, we need to gently bring it back. This is, if you think of all of the different meditation techniques, they're all doing the same thing. They're developing our powers of concentration. They're developing our powers of focus. And they're helping us to learn how to keep our mind from wandering. I remember the first time I sat down to meditate, and it was simple breath meditation. You know, inhale, say 1, exhale. Inhale, say 2, exhale. Go 1 to 5, and then start at 1 again. And the first time I sat down to do that, I couldn't get to 5. I'd inhale and get to 1, and I'd inhale and get to 2, and then I'd say, oh, look, I'm meditating, or something, and I'd be completely distracted. Darn, I missed lost count. And then you just simply go back to 1, see? And then maybe you get to 5 a couple times, and then lose track. And then maybe you get to 5 3 or 4 times and lose track. Then one day you get all the way to 20 minutes in a meditation without losing track. Now, I'm not saying that other thoughts don't arise, but we don't become entangled with them. Okay, they're there. It's like the TV's on in the other room. It's there, but you're not really watching it. You're not really hooked. It's just there. Right? So that's 2 simple techniques. Focus on the third eye. Bring your attention physically. Close your eyes physically. Turn your eyes upward, as if you're looking in at that spot. Breathe in. Imagine your head fills with light and it shoots out the top of your head and showers down on your body. Breathe in, count to 1, exhale. Breathe in, count to 2, exhale. Go 1 to 5, over and over and over again. We cannot change that which we are not aware of. Right? Doing these simple techniques helps us to become aware of the wandering nature of mind. And once we become aware of it, then we can do something about it. We can continue to be aware during the day, you know. Now, as we were chatting before we started the service this morning, as we were chatting on the bridge, you know, the topic came up of, do we ever have thoughts that we wish we hadn't had? You know, do we ever wish harm to another? So, well, I'm so mad I'd like to punch that guy right in the nose, the one that cut me off, you know. And yes, you see, that's part of life. That's part of life. That happens to us. But what we have been taught in our society and in our culture, what we have been taught is, well, you should never have those thoughts, you see. So pretend you never have them, or if you do have them, run away from them, ignore them, pretend they're not there. See, and we can't change them. You see, we can't change them if we are not aware of them. So this is why learning additional techniques of how to deal with strong emotions when they come up, how to deal with uncomfortable things when they come up, so that we can take the energy out of them, is so important. I was watching a talk, Thich Nhat Hanh, the talk, our Zoom group had been watching it, on dealing with strong emotions, and he said, you know, we in the West, we don't teach young people how to deal with their strong emotions, how to suffer, he put it. Now, he's not saying that we should teach them to go out and cause suffering to themselves. He's saying when suffering arises, which it will, we need to know how to deal with that. Because if we don't, it's going to come up in some other way. It's going to keep coming up. And he said, if we could teach our young children how to deal with strong emotions, we could save lives. We could save lives, because young people are becoming overwhelmed with their thoughts and their emotions, and they're so identifying with them, they think that the only way to escape them is to leave this world. I thought, how powerful is that? So we become aware of what's going on. This is, you know, the techniques of mindfulness have talked about. there's plenty of good resources for mindfulness in Plum Village channel on YouTube. But we become aware, you see, we become aware that there's something there. And that something is a distraction. That something is holding us back. That something is keeping us from participating in the natural expansion of life. We're trying to pretend it's not there. We're trying to pretend, like the New Thought minister that went to hell and said, it's not hot and I'm not here. We're trying to pretend, you see. We're trying to say it's not there, but it's there. It's there. So what we want to be able to do is, first of all, be aware. See, be aware. Be aware. And the techniques that I gave you help us to be aware. And when something comes up that we're not happy with, like, ooh, that's unpleasant. Don't engage it. Just observe it. Just observe it. So as we start to become angry, we can be aware that anger is arising. And rather than saying, I am angry and I need to yell and hit something and do all these different things, see, we could just say, anger is arising. We can take a breath. I'm aware that anger is there. We can exhale. I am aware that anger is there. And just that simple act of observing it, of catching it, of being the witness of the anger instead of being a victim of our own anger, you see, that tends to, we don't feed it. It takes the energy out of it. It kind of reminds me, like if you out of the corner of your eye, you catch one of the kids sneaking to the cookie jar, toddler, and you say, what are you doing? And they stop, It's like, if I don't move, I'm invisible, you see. When we catch our strong emotion coming up and we say, I see you. What are you doing? It takes the energy out of it. It stops. But we have to be aware. So this is where practicing a technique that increases our awareness then allows us to carry that awareness over during the day. You can be aware of breathing during the day. You can be aware of the gaps in your breath during the day. And you become aware of the activity of mind during the day. And when something comes up that you don't want, you can just observe it. Just observe it. But then, you see, you can do something else. That's another technique. What you can do is you can bring up the opposite. So if anger, for example, comes up, if I am angry, what is the opposite of anger, you see? Isn't the opposite of anger love? Because anger, lack of love, perfect love casts out fear, the Bible tells us. So while we've got that anger suspended and we're observing it and the light's turned on and we're looking at it, then we can literally bring ourselves to think of love. Who do you love? What do you love? When have you experienced love in your... And what happens is that as you start to become more aware of love, the anger disappears. The anger goes away. Last technique I'm going to give you for this morning. I said there's another physiological technique that will help stop thoughts, right? So we become aware of what's going on in the activity of our consciousness. We can direct it by observing it and stopping it and changing it. And then, of course, we keep our mind more on things that we want and less on the things that we don't want. Technology calls this nurturing the good seeds. Right? So don't pay attention to things that are going to awaken strong negative emotions in you. I told you that one of the ways that misinformation and propaganda work is by first awakening outrage in somebody. So you read a headline and it's an outrageous headline, and right away you're engaged you're in outrage. And from that point on, whatever they tell you just kind of, it enters in, and you tend to believe it. And the propagandists know this, and they do it deliberately. So don't go to places that are going to try to push your outrage button so that they can manipulate you. Okay? Become aware of what it is that triggers your negative emotions, and avoid them. Just don't go there, you know. I'm not saying don't be aware of what's going on in the world, don't be aware of what's going on in the news, but don't feed the negative seeds by participating in things that manipulate. And instead, spend time with joy, spend time with love, spend time with happiness, spend time with mindfulness. Now the last technique that I'm going to breathing technique comes from Zen. And the idea is you breathe in, you belly breathe. You know, like a baby does. If you watch a baby sleep, their belly goes up and down, not their chest, but their belly goes in and out. So you want to breathe from the belly. You want to pull the diaphragm down from the belly, and you want to get your belly to go out like a big beach ball. Or mine is like a big beach ball. I don't know what yours is. You want to get that belly to expand. And then as you exhale, you want to exhale in short bursts with a huh sound. So you go huh, 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 huh. And with the last one, you completely expel all the air. Then you inhale. Bring the belly way out. You know, huh, 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 like that. Now the way this works is when you do these short pulsing tightening of the abdomen, it tends to stop thought. If you think about it, if you're in any sort of danger, you tighten your stomach. Right? You're driving down the road and a deer shoots out in front of you, and you grab the wheel and you hit the brake, and what do you do with your stomach? You've contracted everything down there, and you're no longer analyzing. You're no longer thinking, gee, I wonder what kind of deer that is. Was that a male or a female? Did it have a rack on the top? Or was it a young deer? You are completely aware. You are beyond thought. You see, you just are. So contracting the stomach like that has a way of stopping that activity. So this is another thing that you can do. You're, excuse me. Something happens, you're aware that you are becoming angry. You're aware that you're becoming outraged. You're aware that you're becoming sad. It's just an emotion that you don't want to feel. You observe it. It's there. You don't run from it. You're going to let it go back down. See? You're going to let it subside. And what you can do is, in addition to observing it, as I just discussed, you can just take a breath and then breathe, contracting your stomach. See, when we bring our attention to something else, we're not feeding that strong emotion anymore. And without being fed, it dissolves. It dissolves. So what's been holding us back? What have we let hold us back? You know, there's lots of different things we can look at. Where do I want to go? As Wendy opened us with a quote, where do I want to go? Well, we talked about that a month ago. We want to go to happiness. We want to just let happiness be our guide. We want to follow happiness. And what are the things that distract us from happiness? We want to be aware of those things, right? We want to do our technique. We want to sit in discipline a couple times a day if we can, and just do our technique that is going to get us away from the very thing that takes us away from happiness. Because the happiness is already there, the joy is already there, the love is already there. But we've got all these other things going on distracting us. So we do our technique. We do our technique. We become aware of ideas that we hold to be true that are not true. And we let them go. We become aware of ideas of our conditions of happiness. In other words, I'll be happy when. And we realize that our happiness is not dependent on any when or any condition. That we can be happy right here and right now. See? The divine mind has created each and every one of us out of itself. It has left us alone to discover that magnificence. And it has given us the ability, the responsibility, and the accountability to become aware, self-aware, and to direct our own thoughts. We must do it. No one else can do it for us. Remember when I was talking about happiness, I said the Dalai Lama said he believes that we can be happy, but it's accomplished through training the mind. What we're talking about here is training your mind. You training your mind for happiness. No one else can do it for you. There are good techniques that will help you to do it. But, you know, it's like reading a book on good nutrition. You can learn a lot about good nutrition, but until you change the food you eat, it's not going to help you. You can read a book about all of the benefits of physical exercise, but until you engage in exercise, it's not going to help you. And we can read and listen and get all kinds of information about the techniques of training our mind. But until you do it, until I do it, until we do it, it's not going to help. So I hope that if we look back over like these last 2 months, the kind of things that we've been talking about with happiness and training the mind and letting go and techniques, I would hope that the desire to actively participate, more actively participate, to consciously participate in the training of your own mind through finding techniques that work for you. If these don't work for you, Patanjali's got 111 techniques in his Yoga Sutras, and there's many authors, Osho being one of them, there's many authors who have expanded on those and explained them. Find a technique that you will stay with, but realize the importance of practice. It's kind of like the German professor who was completely invested in learning this art, and then decided that he had to learn how to breathe. You and I are completely invested in learning the art of life, in learning who and what we are, in discovering more of the beauty of the spiritual magnificence that we are. We are invested in that. It's up to us. Let's do it. And so it is. And Reverend